Hey everyone, Poke Bunny here with my first build order tutorial video on my new YouTube channel. Today, we will be going over a 2-1-1 into 2-base all-in against Zerg, so that will start off with a Marine Stim drop and be followed by a Marine tank all-in. The 2-1-1 is a pretty standard build order that you may have seen a lot from professional Terran players. The follow-up is a little bit more unique, and I'll be going over some of the build order quirks and differences as we go. So, build order starts off very standard with a first SCV rally to your ram to create a supply depot, followed by a barracks and then a gas. You'll be starting off with a standard Reaper expand and going into a 2-1-1. So, first during this intro I want to talk a little bit about map choice. Abyssal Reef is a great map for this kind of build order. It's a medium distance map where you're able to cross the map relatively quickly with Medevacs and with your follow-up force. It's got a good choke at the natural that you can 2-base all in with, siege below your opponent's natural, and you've got a good amount of flexibility with your initial 2-1-1 where you can move between the third base and the natural and pressure both locations and clear creep. Other maps in the current map pool that may be suitable for this opening include Defender's Landing, because it's got a relatively small rush distance, and perhaps Sequencer, because you can siege at the top of the ramp leading to your opponent's third base if he takes the unsafe third. Plus, I just don't think going into a macro game on Sequencer against Zerg is all that promising. Anyway, so as I mentioned, you'll be starting off with a Reaper expand, getting that first Reaper and the orbital command on 19 supply, and starting the command center immediately after on 20. After the command center, you're going to be throwing down your second racks right away at 150 minerals, followed by another SCV. When your orbital command finishes, make sure you keep on top of your SCV production and muling, as this build order really relies on that great efficiency in order to get out the strongest timing attacks. When the Reaper finishes, you're going to be throwing down a reactor on that first barracks, and then a supply depot at your wall on 22. Some people like to get this second supply depot before the second gas. I find it times out okay with the later second supply depot, but if that's what you prefer, it won't affect the build order too much. As you near 100 gas, you may want to get ready to make a factory. I actually start my factory a little bit on the late side this game, but not too late. Not too critical to start your factory immediately at 100 gas, because you will be waiting a little bit before you start your starport regardless. So on that second racks, it is however critical that you immediately start a tech lab. One mistake you'll notice I make in this video is that I'll be starting 2 more Marines before this before the Stim upgrade. So I should only have 2 Marines before starting my Stim, while I actually start up to 4. You want to start that natural orbital as soon as possible. As you can see, I'm now about to make that mistake regarding the Marines. Not quite enough money to start my Stim right away. If all goes well, you should start your Stim by the 3-minute mark. Stim takes 2 minutes and 1 second to complete. So if you start it by the 3-minute mark, it will complete by roughly the 5-minute mark. After you start the Stim and your factory finishes, you're going to want to throw down a starport and a reactor on your factory. So when those finish, you're going to swap those up to start some Medevacs right away and continue Marine and SCV production. With your Reaper, you want to poke around and look for a potential third base. Make sure your opponent did in fact go hatch first. If your opponent doesn't go hatch first, you're going to want to turn around with your Reaper right away to defend your command center from any incoming wings. And your SCVs. So this Reaper really doesn't serve too much of a purpose other than scouting. You can get off some basic harass, but the most important thing is to see your opponent's third base timing, as I did. If it's any later than around 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you're going to want to be a little bit alarmed, because it's highly likely that your opponent is going for some sort of 2-base tech build or an all-in. So I'm going to be starting 2 Medevacs up here and a Widow Mine as soon as my starport finishes. One thing you'll notice I do differently about this build compared to a lot of Terrans is I like to go for 14 Marines and a mine rather than the common 16 Marines. So after you go up to your 14 Marines and a mine and 2 Medevacs, you're going to want to start an engineering bay at your natural, as well as a third gas. So I'll be doing these things right here, and then you'll be moving out with your drop as soon as all these units finish. When your Medevacs finish, you also want to lift your starport to create another reactor and build a barracks on the vacated reactor by your starport. This is because you're going to want to amp up your Marine production as quickly as possible, and you're going to be saving some gas for tanks and upgrades, like combat shields +1 and siege tanks. So with your initial drop, you're going to want to put some pressure on your opponent's third base and natural, clear creep, get any free units that you can. Sometimes you can win the game outright here if your opponent is not quite prepared. As you can see, my stim finished just a shade after 5 minutes. If you do the build correctly, it should finish around 5 minutes, and your units should be landed and moving into your opponent's side of the map by then. So it's important to keep up marine production as you do this. You're also going to go up to 5 racks behind this. So a little bit after your 3rd racks, you're going to throw down your 4th and 5th, and also start tank production. My tank production has started a little late here. You want to start that tank production as soon as possible so that you can get up to 2 tanks as soon as possible. And 2 tanks is when you're going to move out with your reinforcements. As you can see, I'm just poking around here at the 3rd base, clearing as much creep as possible. I'll then move over to the natural and clear some creep over there. So ideally, the goal of this build is that your +1 attack, combat shields, and 2 tanks will all roughly line up so you can have a really strong timing push towards the Zerg's natural or 3rd base. So on this map, you can see there's a great cliff by the natural that will be good for pushing, while the 3rd base may not serve as such a desirable location since it's a little harder to get to. So I'm going to move over here and clear some creep by the natural, since this will be my push location. I'm prioritizing creep over killing units, since it's really critical that my reinforcements are able to set up that siege position outside the natural. Once I get there, it's pretty much a 1 game, unless my opponent busts out with an insane amount of units. It's important that you keep up with your supply depots. Make sure you get your natural and main fully saturated with SCVs. You only need 3 gas for this builder, so don't worry about taking that 4th gas. You're going to be just creating tank, marine, medevac until you win or lose. So this is definitely an all-in. You're not looking for any follow-up. So with these reinforcements, you're going to want to engage your opponent's units immediately, assuming that you can, and clear as much creep and try to only engage off creep. As you can see, I'm being a little bit careful with my units not to commit too far onto creep or allow my opponent to get a false around, using the choke and his lack of vision against him and making sure I clear that creep as much as possible. If you can get a siege tank set up in this position with reinforcements continuing across the map, you're in a great spot, as your opponent will have a really tough time breaking this. As you can see, you're going to want to kite back away from your tanks against Ling Bane. You can actually, in fact, use your tanks as tanks. They do have a lot of health, and Banelings crashing into those tanks will just make the job even easier for your Marines. But don't leave them completely vulnerable. Anyway, if all goes well, this should clean up your opponent. If not, you can continue pushing across the map until victory or defeat. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, but I hope you enjoyed this first build order tutorial, and please feel free to give me any feedback for the next one. Thanks!